I'd like to talk about the mental aspect of addiction. And it's very important to understand that the spiritual is the core. So once the addict heals spiritually, mentally, and physically, he heals. So primary focus is the spiritual. However, there's this mental aspect of addiction that is so misunderstood that we really hope to clarify it now. And it's a very, very important point. First of all, obviously, if the addict never took the first drink or the first drug, he wouldn't have a binge. So the question is not why he's powerless after he takes the first drink or drug. As some of the old timers I've heard in AA, NA, they could say, well, Ray Charles can see that. It's obvious that once the addict uses, there's a binge, a compulsion at that point. The problem is, why does he go back? Why does he take the first one? Right? Over and over again. Why? If he only stays away from the first one. So this is the main problem. The mental aspect, the crux of the problem, centers in the mind rather than the body. Now, this is termed an insanity. Insanity is a very strong word, and it's taken very literally in the 12 steps. The second step says restored to sanity. The addict is insane in relationship to drugs, not his use in respect to the behaviors under the influence. If you give a large dose of any substance to someone who never used drugs, people could say his behavior is insane. That's not what we're talking about. That is not the insanity at all. The insanity is as follows. When an addict is about to use, what happens is, in his mind, the suffering of the past, all the commitments he's made, all the rehabs he's gone to, all the classes he's studied, the books he's read, the doctors that have talked to him, that inner core, sincere crying out, I can't use anymore, right? That is blocked out. It's literally forgotten from consciousness. It cannot go in the mind. If it's there, it's in some backward way. It's that this insanity supersedes it. It's stronger than the rational thought or the realization that I'm going to relive the suffering I did before. I can't do this. I almost died last week. That doesn't come in the mind of an addict to stop him. It's blocked out. Not that he doesn't care, not that he's not interested in his life, not that he's selfish to the family. It's because there's an insanity that prevents the normal functioning of the mind. He can't recall the suffering to stop the present action of using. Another aspect of the insanity is that the consequences that will happen from using in the future, the present into the future, are often also blocked. So a person who realizes, well, if I put my hand on a hot stove, I will be burnt as in the past, or there'll be a present consequence of getting burnt, that doesn't go in the mind of an addict. In other words, it gets blocked out by the insanity. That's the mental sickness of addiction. Again, not because it's just an impulsive act, not because it's the symptom of another mental health disorder. Addiction has a life of its own. It controls the mind. It overwhelms the mind and blocks out rational thinking. That's why it's an illness. That's why it's an insanity. A person goes into a court, he says, I have an insanity plea. I wasn't capable of making the right decision at the time. The insanity overwhelmed my mind. Now, that's a strong claim. I mean, even someone who has psychotic features, someone who has mental health illness, doesn't necessarily have an insanity plea to exempt himself from the punishment of his actions in a court of law. That's how sick the mind of an addict is. Now, the final aspect of the insanity is even deeper than what we described. It's called the subtle insanity. An addict could be absolutely enjoying himself. He's with the family. There's warmth. He's going, and life seems good. Like things are starting to get better. Then out of nowhere, without any trigger, like I heard someone say, trigger was like Roy Rogers' horse. That's the only trigger we're dealing with. Out of nowhere, right? The thought might come. One hit would be nice. One puff on the whatever it is. That just thought comes out of nowhere. And he just does it, thoughtlessly. And that's what, like, there's a story in the big book called Fred's Story, and it says on page 42, and he discusses what's called strange mental blank spots. The mind blanks out entirely. There's literally a blanking of the mind, thoughtlessness, and the addict uses without any thoughts. This is a very, very deep level of the insanity. We need to help the addict to see this, and that motivates him to want to recover, because once we see this, we understand it's a hopeless condition. There's no way of changing that mental state in any way, because the insanity has to be removed. There's no other way out. You can't learn your way out of insanity. That's why the second step of the program says that this higher power, a power greater than the individual, will restore his sanity.